Hi, this is David Arkenstone. You're listening to the Your Morning Coffee podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
For music business worldwide, the three major music companies generated $1 billion more in the first half of 2023 versus the first half of 2022.
And from Berkeley Online, AI Music, what musicians need to know.
And from Billboard's State of the Hot 100 Top 10 Mid-Year 2023 report. Boy, we got a lot of them, Jade. A lot of stuff to talk about. Sad passings this week. It's been a week, but we are ready to get going right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air, on the air, on the air, on the air, on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Nice to see you, Jay, on a Saturday.
Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, I love that intro. What a fabulous intro.
Yeah, thank you, David Arkenstone. For those who haven't listened to David Arkenstone, I was introduced to him in the 80s. I was working for Universal, and we distributed a label called Neurotta and put out some of his records and got to see him play live, and always been such a big fan of David Arkenstone.
Yep, he's a 5-time Grammy nominee. He's got a new album coming out on September 13th with the first single out. It was released just this last Friday. The Icy Brook Finds Its Way. He also has an upcoming 16-date West Coast tour, over 80 studio albums. Wow.
Quite prolific. By the way, that song you just listened to is that The Icy Brook Finds Its Way. And one other thing about David Arkenstone is that I was reading this article about search terms for smart speakers. Mm-hmm. And before the pandemic, the number one search term was chill. And then during the lockdown, it became children's music for obvious reasons. I wonder if it's back to chill, but that's what I always thought about David Arkenstone, is he's this multi-instrumentalist, super melodic, just really cool stuff to listen to when you want to just chill.
That's right.
So, he's also contributed music for World of Warcraft, believe it or not. And a special shout out to Bridget Sholin, who was our regional for Narada Records back in the 80s. We're still friends today. And just a big fan of Narada and David Arkenstone. Well, he's not on Narada anymore.
No, yes,
but
exactly. Well, and we talked about the early days of SoundScan and the some would say surprises. It wasn't necessarily a surprise if you work in a record store, but we talked about how country suddenly, we had concrete numbers on country. And again, that broad category of new age, whatever that means, but he was broadly in that category. And that was also an awareness when SoundScan hit of how successful these sort of instrumental and what we now call chill records. They were huge. They sold a lot of records. And
they sure did. I was working as a rep in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we couldn't keep those CDs in stock at Tower Records because, with the Bay Area, a lot of, very busy people, affluent people working hard, and they wanted something to chill out to when they got home. Another article that really caught my eye this week, because we've been talking about BandLab quite a bit in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And the headline was BandLab advocates for ethical AI in music creation at the AI4 conference, announces support for human artistry campaign. And I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you and I both know, BandLab's flagship namesake social music making app, which counts well above 60 million registered users, offers a range of features for emerging creators, such as the cross-platform digital audio workstation Studio, royalty-free sample and loop service sounds, and the AI music generator tool Songstarter. A lot of amazing, powerful things in that.
Oh, yeah. It's a beast. BandLab is really reshaping the landscape. Let me try that one again. BandLab is really reshaping the landscape of music production and revolutionizing the way musicians create, collaborate, and share their art. And so that headline caught our attention. And I had a chance to sit down with their CEO, co-founder, Meng Ru Kuok, and I asked him about the news. Let's listen in.
Meng, so great to see you. How would you describe BandLab to someone who may not be a music creator, maybe somebody from a label or an artist manager?
So sometimes the way I describe BandLab is a little bit like Facebook meets GarageBand meets SoundCloud, Lambda, Splice, all the different things that you can do to actually make music as well as share music and connect and everything in between in one place. We have amazing respect for all these platforms, and we really believe that there is this opportunity to create a community of creators, and that really is what BandLab is. So, if you think of the creation side, which is really what we're most notable for at this point in time, BandLab to GarageBand, or tools, digital audio workstations and things like that are a bit more like Google Docs to Microsoft Word, or Sheets to Excel, or Canva to Photoshop, or Miro to a traditional whiteboard. So something mobile, cloud focused, and really easy to collaborate with. And that's the creation side of BandLab and the whole suite of tools around that.
Last week at the AI4 conference, you announced BandLab support for the Human Artistry campaign. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, look, I think, again, we're very, very fortunate to be speaking a lot these days about AI, but, we aren't an AI company. I'd say we're very much, first and foremost, a music company for whom AI is just one of our tools and one of the things that we just think of as technology, empowering creativity. One of our tools, Songstarter, is an idea generator powered by AI, but really about empowering human creativity. It's called Songstarter, not Song Finisher, for a reason. And I think part of the reason we align with the Human Artistry campaign is very much because the core principles we care about at BandLab are really about empowering creators around the world, right? And we believe that there's a world in which there are no barriers to music creation, and really breaking down these boundaries is the core vision of what I co-founded BandLab for. And with that in mind, we really, really care about ethical license use of AI because, at the end of the day, it's hard enough already for a kid to go out there and try and put his music on Spotify and compete with not just his peers, but Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, the Rolling Stones, Nirvana, Johnny Cash, right? B.B. King, Charlie Christian, Beethoven, Bach, everyone, the greatest legends of the generations before, let alone for this kid in a township in South Africa, in Cape Town, competing with a billion virtual Drakes, right? So this is why we care a lot about supporting creator choice on whether they want to be protective of their rights or whether they want to be liberal. We think that's really ultimately where we're going to empower the next generation of creators and hopefully create a value unlock for the incumbents and the people who currently are creating or have created amazing music in the past.
Thank you, Meng. Continued success.
Thanks so much, Jay.
Wow. I mean, it is, again, when you think about the power of having those tools in a handheld device as you're on the subway or you're walking down the street, I mean, it's all there. And it's just crazy how well it works. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it keeps getting better and better. Remember when we were younger and playing in bands and drum machines started taking off and we thought, wow, this is really cool. And then they had like little 4-track studios that you could have at home. Studios. And that changed. Yeah, it changed the demo process completely. And now it's evolved into like, you know, these digital audio workstations, you know, and we talk about those a lot on, you know, on the show, but this is even down the road further because now you don't need to go into an expensive studio necessarily early on. And you maybe don't know how to operate, as Meng says, maybe you don't know how to operate. Even GarageBand, there still is, you know, this barrier to entry. Not everybody is tech savvy like that. Not every creator, but this really levels that playing field.
Yeah. Oh, it's miraculous and super cool. And like you were saying, you know, you don't necessarily need to have any level of tech competence or any necessarily what we would consider musical competence, meaning like you don't need to play an instrument or really even have much of a knowledge of how music is put together. It just has the tools there built in, and the next thing you know, you've cranked out a tune. And
I think that's a wonderful thing. I really do. And a couple of things really quickly. One is Meng showed me a video of this young creator being interviewed, and he showed the interviewer how he could just create a song right there on the fly during the interview. Wow. That was stunning. The other thing you were mentioning to me is, you know, we were talking about that conference that he just came back from. It's called the AI4 conference. We should go to that. Yeah,
absolutely. They have it. It was just ended in Vegas, actually, and I would really like to check that out next year. So we're going to put that in our calendars and try to make it out for that because a lot of interesting things. Because of course, this space is just, I mean, it's really hard to keep up. It is changing so quickly, and you know,
it is. I feel differently about it than I did sort of the Web3, you know, NFT, virtual worlds, DAOs. And I think that underlying technology, and I've said this all along, is going to be with us for a long time. I think it's solid. But I just think some of the execution wasn't good, wasn't fully baked. But I don't feel that about AI. People ask me sometimes, well, you know, isn't AI kind of the new Web3? And I don't think so, because it's been in our lives for so long already. Yeah. And now it's just sort of taking leaps and bounds with things like ChatGPT, and it's being added to advertising platforms and just so many things that we use every day. So we'll stay pretty close to this AI stuff, and we have another story we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, and of course the confusion about AI, which is also part of the understanding of it, is just there's so many different areas, so many different verticals, buckets that you can. Yeah, the broad phrase, just AI, it could mean so many things. And that's really part of the confusion, I think, that's out there, the part of the fear that's out there.
I agree.
And I think when you kind of break it down, it's not fake Drake, you know, it's that's the knee-jerk reaction. Oh, I don't, you know, but no. Let me show you this and this.
Yeah, there's so much more to it. And the second story that we're covering today from Berkeley Online addresses some of that. But before we jump in the stories, anybody that listens to our little show knows that we're big fans of music documentaries. And there was some news this week about documentaries. And there was also a really cool piece that I want to walk through with you. The headline was From Searching for Sugar Man to Don't Look Back, the 32 best rock documentaries ever made. And as soon as I saw this, I thought of you and I sent it to you. And there's two, before we jump into that, there's two documentaries that a friend of mine, Elliot, saw and said were really good that are, one just came out in July and the other one comes out in September. The first one is Reinventing Elvis, the 68 comeback. That one, I can't wait to see. That's out. And then one that's airing on CNN September 4th is Little Richard, I Am Everything. And I don't think everybody knows how influential Little Richard has been.
When you look at the history of rock and roll, he is an early first chapter in terms of his importance and his legacy and all of that stuff. And yeah, I've seen the trailer for that documentary and I can hardly wait to see it. And all the way but again, that was such an era that was so well before our interest in music. A lot of these pioneers sometimes just get forgotten or they don't make the leap necessarily, or they're not played on classic rock radio or whatever. And I think that's the beauty of some of these music documentaries is it fills in the gaps of your knowledge depending on your age, because it was just hard to Little Richard hit in the 50s, well before our birth. Yeah. So, why would we, other than, certainly early Beatles were super influenced by them. But again, that was when we were, just barely born. And so it's easy to not know about some of these pioneers, but the beauty of that and the Elvis comeback special, I actually went to a showing of that with Steve Binder, who was the main guy in this documentary. He was the guy for the show, and boy, he had just some fascinating stories. I'm sure they're going to be in this documentary. That's going to be a wonderful one. And then there's just so many great ones coming out. There's not enough hours in the day to catch up with all of them.
Right. And before we jump into some of the ones that they list as, the very best ones ever made, you and I saw a screening of this documentary called Immediate Family, Denny Tedesco's follow-up to Wrecking Crew. And that documentary has appearances by Carole King, James Taylor, Linda Ronstadt, David Crosby, Jackson Browne, Lyle Lovett, Keith Richards, Don Henley, Stevie Nicks, Phil Collins. It's absolutely incredible. And if you don't know who Immediate Family is, it's a super group of basically artists that were on everything from Carole King's Tapestry to all of those albums by artists that I just mentioned. The band is Danny Korchmar, Leland Sklar, Waddy Wachtel, Russ Kunkel, and Steve Postel. So that is coming out. We got to see a screening, thankfully. But let's talk about some of these from Yahoo. One of them, I think the first one you told me about, but I haven't seen yet. And that's about the band Wham.
Yeah, which is great. Boy, if you haven't seen it, and that is on Netflix, I believe. By the way, one of the things about documentaries that's hard to, because when you tell people about give a certain documentary, the first thing they say is, well, where is it? And it changes. You got to look it up. Maybe I saw it in Netflix. It may not be on Netflix anymore. These have finite contractual windows, and so they sometimes bounce around. You may have to rent them, but I think I want to say that the Wham one was actually a Netflix production, so you will find that one there. And again, just a great story, and it's worth the time. It'll put a smile on your face because. I certainly imagine, I remember sort of later period George Michael, and to see him as that little teenage pop star, it's fantastic. It's really, really good. But, I don't know about you, but I looked at these and there's a lot of documentaries I haven't seen. And so.
Oh, I printed this thing out. I highlighted a bunch of them that I didn't even know were out there. Before we move on from Wham, I think you had mentioned when you saw it that people don't know the whole story, that Andrew Ridgeley was really more involved in that duo than most people think.
Yeah, not only creatively, but just sort of, in terms of support. He really gave George, I guess George kind of struggled with kind of self-confidence and things like that. And he was really kind of pushing him out there and was actually very much ready for Wham to end and for George to take over his solo career. And Andrew comes across as a pretty magnanimous guy in that documentary, but it's really well done, and it's a lot of footage from the era, and you know they were big in the States, but they were huge in the UK, and so you know you kind of get a little bit of a perspective of what was going on over there and how big and huge they were, and of course some backstories of just the business side of things, how they got signed and all that stuff. It's a really great movie, so highly recommend it.
I will definitely watch that one. One that they list here that I have seen, which is absolutely amazing, highly recommend it, from 2002, Standing in the Shadows of Motown. Did you ever see that?
I did. It's fantastic. It is so great, and highly recommended. You know, you really get, again, so many of those guys were just, their names weren't even on the records. And I've read a report, or not a report, something where Paul McCartney was talking about, you know, trying to figure out who those guys were. They heard those Motown songs and go, who the hell is playing that? And in the case of the bass player, James Jamerson, you know, it was really hard to find out who they were. And so they got a really great sort of a recognition from an era when they were completely invisible to the average listener. So it's a great one. Really a great one. And of course we lost Rodriguez, the gentleman that was in Searching for Sugar Man, and that's also on this list, which we both loved. And I gotta say, I have not seen their number one, which they say is the best music documentary, Moon Age Daydream, which just came out last year. It's the David Bowie one. I do want to see that. And of course, they mentioned The Last Waltz in here as well, the band one with Robbie Robertson's passing this last week. I'm going to go back and revisit that one because that is a fantastic documentary as well. There's just so many of them.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple that I would recommend too. Coming in at number 20 on this list is Anvil, the story of Anvil.
I haven't seen that one.
From 2008. Not only is it fun to watch, it's like Spinal Tap, but in real life. Not really. It's really great, but it really sort of revived their career after that. But it's one of those that, again, I was never a huge Anvil fan, but with a lot of these documentaries, I will watch a documentary about a band I've never heard before because I just love seeing how the sausage is made. I love, you know, the behind the scenes, you know, sort of things in these things. But were there any in here that you had seen that you think are really good?
Yeah, they also mentioned the, well, of course, the George Harrison one, Living in the Material World, which, gosh, I can't believe it. That came out more than 10 years ago. My goodness.
Wow, really?
It came out in 2011. And Martin Scorsese directed that. And so that's a really great one, a really great tribute to George. And that was just fantastic. Also Marley, which again, that came out more than 10 years ago, the Bob Marley documentary. That is wonderful and fantastic.
I haven't seen that one yet. I definitely want to see that. They have the Beatles Get Back, which you and I talk about. I mean, the later one from 2021 by Peter Jackson. Mm-hmm. That's on here. That's another one that I have seen and I highly recommend. But I highlighted that George Harrison, Living in the Material World. I haven't seen that yet. I'm really looking forward to that.
It's really, really good. Really, really, really good. And Buena Vista Social Club, that came out almost 25 years ago. That's another great one, seeing it with all the Cuban musicians. Oh, great documentary. So, I mean, there's just tons of them.
And remember the one that you and I talked about when it came out on the show, that Summer of Soul. It's just magic. I can't believe they've had all that footage and stored away somewhere. Some of the greatest artists of all time, you know, Stevie Wonder, B.B. King, Nina Simone. And it's just so amazing. The sound is good. The film is good. It was like finding treasure.
It is. And, you know, and again, it's amazing when these documentary filmmakers, they really go to town and find, you know, a lot of, I mean, with YouTube now, you can see a lot of stuff that you never, ever were able to see. But even in a lot of these documentaries, they go deep. They find a lot of footage that nobody has ever seen before, and that just makes it so interesting. But again, you know, it fills in blanks of knowledge. You know, it's like, who knew about this stuff? And there's so many stories to tell, and it's exciting.
It's so funny when I meet people that they typically mention when they talk about the show, hey, you know, I heard you guys talking about documentaries. Have you seen this one? And I would put that out there for anybody who's listening right now. If you have a documentary that's not in that piece or one that you really like, please reach out to us. We would love to do that. We're going to jump into our stories in a moment. But first, let's thank our sponsors, starting with Bandzoogle. The Your Morning Coffee podcast is brought to you by our friends at Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform. It makes it really easy to build a beautiful website and EPK for your music. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting, custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to help you sell your music and merch, commission-free, that's key, commission-free crowdfunding, fan subscription features, mailing list tools, help you grow your fan list and send newsletters, social media integrations, and live support, which is really good, by the way, I've used it, live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com, try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code MORNINGCOFFEE, all one word. That'll get you 15% off your first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Morning Coffee.
Indeed. We are also sponsored by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It is edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
Yes, Bands in Town, new numbers. Over 80 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist services platform, connecting over 590,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
Indeed, and big thanks to the Music Business Association. The Music Business Association creates the rooms in which the important conversations that shape our industry's future take place. Our membership represents every major segment of the global music business, including labels and distributors, music streaming, retail and wholesale, publishers and PROs, rights management and metadata, artist managers, tech and startups, lots of great stuff. Do visit musicbiz.org for more information. So big thanks, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, Bands in Town, and the Music Business Association. We
Thank
are
you very much.
Eternally grateful, and I get to hang out
Yes, we are.
with my good buddy of almost 25 years, none other than Jay Gilbert. He's a music industry consultant. He's the curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups.
Yes, sir. And I get to do this show each week with Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group. And I will say this, if we didn't have this podcast, we'd still be getting on the phone or going to have a cheeseburger or whatever to talk about this stuff because we just love it.
Absolutely. And we love to catch up and see what's going on. And it's never a dull moment. And we've managed to just extend those conversations and create a podcast. So we appreciate people listening in because we love just chatting about this stuff. And there's always more things to talk about. And when Jay and I get on, before we even record, the first thing is we review our week. What exciting things have gone on in the week. So it's a treat to get to do this.
It's been a week.
It's been a week. Well, there you go. Yeah, let's kind of break it down and start talking about some of the stories, Jay.
All right.
Yeah, so our first story. Well, go ahead. Am I interrupting?
No, go. We're like stepping on each other. We both want to jump into this. You go right ahead.
All right, the first one is from our good friends over at Music Business Worldwide. The 3 major music companies generated $1 billion more, that is, in the first half of 2023 versus the first half of 2022. So
that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. I would imagine there are some folks in the buildings over there.
$1 billion more. By the way, this story was written by Tim Ingham. And if you listen to this program, you know that we're huge fans of Tim Ingham, Music Business Worldwide, their podcasts, just a class organization over there. And we learned so much from Tim and his team. And he just mentions that they've been crunching a veritable mountain o' numbers. This last week.
Yes.
Mountain o' numbers. That's because in the past week, they saw 2 major music companies, Warner Music Group and Sony Music Group. They posted their calendar Q2 revenue profitability figures for investors. I mean, Sony did too last week via its Japanese parent, Sony Group Corporate.
Yes, these results followed the equivalent calendar Q2 numbers from publicly traded Universal Music Group, the world's largest music rights holder, which it reported to the Amsterdam Euronext late last month. All of this, by the way, it just means that combined with previously reported calendar Q1 figures from UMG, Sony, and WMG, the people over at Music Business Worldwide have managed to kind of crunch a lot of this stuff. And what have they discovered? They said, well, for starters, there's, of course, the headline above. The three majors across recorded music, publishing, and other income streams jointly generated in U.S. dollars $12.99 billion in the first 6 months of 2023. That figure was a clear $1 billion, almost to the penny, actually, larger than the $11.99 billion that the big three generated in revenue in the same period of 2022.
That is very impressive.
And
it also means, that the three majors combined generated an average of approximately $72 million per day in the first half of the year. That's roughly $3 million per hour. I love how they break that down.
God, that's a lot of money. And remember, Jay, do you remember the early 2000s when the music business was just drowning, just terrible? And here we are talking about these fabulous numbers. It goes on to say below, we dig deeper into what each of the three major music companies generated in revenues across four separate categories here in 2023. So number one, of course, is recorded music plus I can't even say it, plus publishing, etc. This brings together all recorded music revenue streams for the majors, with music publishing revenues plus ancillary revenues from operations such as merch and concert ticketing. So a lot of stuff that kind of gets smushed into that. We also have just music publishing, as you'd expect, all revenue attributed to music publishing in the quarter. And we also have recorded music, as you'd expect, all revenues attributed to recorded music by each company in the quarter, including merch, which is strange that gets looped in with that. And then recorded music streaming, revenues attributed to streaming within the recorded music operation of each company in the quarter. And that figure includes both ad-funded and subscription streaming revenue. So those are all the buckets that they kind of tabulate.
That's right. So let's grab the first one, recorded music and publishing, as mentioned, in terms of global revenue streams. And this is leaving out Sony's visual media and platform. Across music publishing, recorded music, and quote-unquote other, the three majors collectively brushed the $13 billion mark in the first half of 2023. Universal Music Group grew its reported half-year revenues by $400 million year over year in the first half of 2023, up over $5.5 billion.
Yeah. Are they dancing in the halls over there in Santa Monica? I think so.
They must be.
Sony grew its total music revenues by $448 million year over year in the first half of this year to $4.47 billion. And Warner's, which had a bit of a soft calendar Q1 in 2023, but a significantly stronger calendar Q2, grew by $155 million year over year, hitting $2.96 billion so far. And that's not insignificant.
For the first half of the year. That is really impressive on all of those. Music publishing, talk about that for a second. They had improved streaming rates in the United States. That helped. All three publishing divisions, they saw significant growth for the first half of the year compared to the first half of this year. Sony's music publishing operation, that topped $1 billion in the first half of the year. That was up $95 million, or 10% year over year, versus the amount it generated in the first period, first half of 2020. That's massive. So, and then coming in a close second is Universal Music Publishing Group, and that generated $961 million in the first half of this year.
God, crazy numbers. And then when you talk about Warner Chappell Music, they hit $540 million in revenue in the period. That represented a $65 million year-over-year increase, and that's up 13.7% year-over-year. So again, a lot of people
good news.
Yeah,
good news all around for all of them. And let's jump into recorded music. And again, you mentioned earlier, this includes merch. That's weird. Okay, but recorded music. All right. Yeah. Universal Music Group generated $4.61 billion in recorded music revenues, plus merch, in the first half of this year. That figure was up $366 million year on year. Is it just me, or is this impressive?
Gosh darn it. I wish I was still there at Universal. The bonuses this year are going to be epic. Sony's global recorded music operation, again, including merch, reported this first half this year, $3.42 billion, up by approximately $352 million versus the same period in 2022. And lastly, but not leastly, Warner Music Group's recorded music division generated $2.43 billion, $89 million more than it generated in the prior year period.
Yeah, Mike, but you know what they say. $1 million here, $1 million there. Pretty soon,
you're talking real money.
real money, right? And then I think the last part of this is really streaming under recorded music. And it's always interesting to drill down into those recorded music numbers and just look at the fastest growing part of the record industry, streaming. Collectively, the major music companies saw year-over-year growth in joint recorded music streaming revenues of, get this, $484 million just in the first half of this year.
Yeah.
Up a combined total of nearly $7 billion.
Crazy. Universal Music Group generated 43% of that figure. It's a little under $3 billion in recorded music streaming revenues. Sony generated $2.33 billion. Up $250 million year over year. And Warner Music Group generated $1.6 billion in recorded music streaming revenues, up by $46 million year over year. And I still, when I see these numbers, we've mentioned this more than a few times on the show. Warner's and Universal, the studios, when they own those music companies, they couldn't wait to throw them out the window and just get rid of the business because it was just tanking. And now you see this, and you wonder if people over there and at Warner Brothers Studios or Universal Studios is going, damn, what were we thinking? We should have hung on to them.
Yeah. Yeah, but remember, you and I were working at major record companies during those times, and we remember when the MP3 just devastated the music industry, things like LimeWire and Napster and Grokster and all of those things. And then, even when iTunes basically came in and Steve Jobs really helped save the industry, although there are those that would argue it wasn't always the best path. But that's when people could just pick off tracks, and that was a different era too. A lot less revenue than we were used to in that CD era. And it's interesting with streaming. There's a lot more revenue to go around. There are those that want to see how the payment process or the economics of streaming, they'd like to see that change and evolve. And it's just like every week we're evolving and changing. It's such a dynamic space right now.
Yes, it certainly is. But boy, when you look at those numbers and the health of the business, it's hard not to kind of put a smile on your face. But again, like you were saying, if you're an artist, it may or may not be working out for you like it was in a previous era. So it kind of depends what your perspective is and where you sit in that ecosystem. But let's jump in.
But it's good news,
It's
right?
good news, though.
Before we jump in, just really quickly, I had one last thing I wanted to say about this, and that is that if you want to dig deeper, we've given you sort of this really great story from Tim Ingham, Music Business Worldwide, some really cool coverage. But if you want to dig a little bit deeper, check out the Billboard newsletter, The Ledger, by our friend Glenn Peoples. It came out Friday. Well, that was August 11th. It comes out every Friday. And he really digs into all of this stuff, and I highly recommend it. Whenever I start looking at these earnings calls and these results, nobody jumps in there deeper than Glenn Peoples and Tim Ingham. So we're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Oh, yeah, and my eyes just glass over whenever all these numbers start coming out. I just go, where are we? And those guys are on it, and they speak that language.
They make sense of it, right?
It makes sense to them, and it does. Sometimes it makes sense to me, sometimes it doesn't. But I can't focus on it for a long time. Where those guys are just like, they just drill down. They are asking questions. They are understanding it. So without them, I'd be lost.
Yeah.
I'd be lost.
And Glenn's really good at looking at all those numbers and then telling you what they mean.
Yes.
Is this good?
Yeah.
And if it is good, is it really good or
yes.
sort of good?
Yes.
And yeah, super great.
need
Sorry, go.
No, I was just going to say, let's jump into our second story now. But that's all true, and thank you for mentioning that. Of course, this is from AI Music. What musicians need to know? I'm sorry, it's not from. This is AI Music. What musicians need to know? This is in a Berklee School of Music article.
It's from Berklee Online. It was written by Talia Smith Muller. And it really caught our attention because, AI is sort of the hot topic right now, but there's so much to learn about it and so much to not be afraid of. And I'll kick it off just by talking about, who was it? It was Christopher Wares, the assistant chair of music business management at Berklee College of Music. He said, some of my students love AI. And they're already using it in a number of different ways, while others want nothing to do with it. He said that there's a lot of heated debate in conversations, and I try to encourage my students to embrace this technology and find new ways to use it to enhance their creative process. I thought that was really smart.
Yeah. And by the way, if you don't know, the Berklee we're talking about is not UC Berkeley here on the West Coast. This is Berklee College of Music in Boston, Berklee, L-E-E at the end, not L-E-Y. And it is amongst the best professional music schools in the world. It's fantastic. So, but they do kind of go into they just start with, what is AI music? And they said, before we're defining what AI music entails, let's first define artificial intelligence. And this is Ware's definition. He said, artificial intelligence is like the brain power of a computer. It's the technology that allows machines to mimic human thinking or behavior, such as problem solving, learning, or recognizing patterns. In the context of music, AI technology has reached the point where it can generate, compose, and enhance musical content that has previously been performed by humans. AI music, this is interesting, can take many forms and types of assistance, from generating an entire song from start to finish, to writing specific aspects of a composition, to mixing and mastering a production, to voice cloning, and more. So it is kind of a really
it's a lot of
stuff. Absolutely.
And people call it different things too. Like Apple, I notice, calls AI machine learning, and some people call it generative AI, depending on what they're talking about. But there are also copyright implications, right? One of the most heated debates now is with AI in the music industry is around who makes money off of work that is created using AI, especially if the algorithm is trained using existing copyrighted material. And you and I talk about that. AI doesn't create something out of nothing. It uses a body of someone's work to generate something, and that's key, right?
You and I have talked about this quite a bit, which is, oftentimes the technology comes first, and then kind of the back office stuff in terms of how do you basically pay the people that in many cases created the things with which the generative is taking in terms of using that as the information it needs to create something new. So it's early days, and this is not dissimilar to when sampling really and hip hop world kind of figured out how it needed to be. And so, it is early days for this. They go on to say legally AI music is still in a gray area, and it raises the question of whether there can be a compromise where artists are credited, compensated, and consenting to having their work or likeness used for AI without limiting the potential for musical creativity using AI technology. To a certain extent, art is derivative of other art. And in this current moment, it's blurry what is inspiration and what is stealing. Some record companies are starting to fight back. So, super.
I thought that was perfect.
Yes.
Really well put. And just adding really quickly, in May of this year, Universal Music Group urged streaming services to block the use of AI-generated music, claiming that it's using their artist music to train its algorithm, right? And that they would take legal action if needed. Spotify responded by taking down 7% of AI-generated music on its platform, which equates to tens of thousands of songs. So that sort of leads us into that, that Drake and the Weeknd thing we've been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. It says, while there isn't much legal precedent for voice cloning, for celebrities, it could fall under their right to publicity as a violation of appropriating their likeness, name, and voice. One of the key examples from the past year was when a TikToker who goes by the name of Ghostwriter used AI to create a fake duet between Drake and The Weeknd titled Heart on My Sleeve. The song was taken down, but there are still versions floating around the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of ethical issues. You and I were talking about that AI rapper FN Meka. Remember that guy who was like a, cartoonish kind of figure that rapped, and there was all this controversy because it wasn't created by people of color. Copyright is just one of those many ethical issues associated with AI. And it's important to remember that this technology and its evolution doesn't come without those types of consequences. It's one of the main concerns is garbage in, garbage out.
Yes, exactly, without a doubt. These folks go on to say if we train these language models or these image generators or these music generators on data that is inherently biased, inherently racist, then whatever we ask for is going to perpetrate those stereotypes. We need to make sure that we've got good data going in and that we're monitoring it. And it's just, and I can think back to, again, the whatever tools are necessary to identify this stuff. I mean, it's a very complex issue and that's coming fast and furious. So
it really is. And the last thing I'll say sort of on this Berkeley Online piece, which we highly recommend, it's really great. They list some of the AI tools, and one of them is one we just talked about with, BandLab Song Starter, which we hear rave reviews about. There's another one called Mid-Journey. One's called Mix Monolith. And then, of course, Landr, L-A-N-D-R, for AI mastering. So it's not all nefarious. I think you can do a lot of great things with ChatGPT. Yeah. My friend Mike Warner, who you know from Work Hard, Playlist Hard, he sent me over this Mike GPT. Instead of Chat GPT, It was Mike GPT. And it drew from his body of work so people could ask it questions and he could answer. And I want to do that with Your Morning Coffee. So I begged Mike to show me how to do that.
Oh, nice. But again, and a lot of this stuff too is like ChatGPT, there's a lot of things that are incorrect on the internet, and I don't know if you've noticed that, Jay, but everything on the internet is not true. And
wait, if it's in print, it's got to be true, right?
One would think, but apparently not. So, when you're using ChatGPT, if it's for sort of like a term paper or some sort of document, I mean, there are just false things that it can pull from, and so you really got to go back and look. I mean, it's not perfect yet, and there's a lot of things going on.
No, it's definitely not perfect, and it only goes through 2021. So there'll be new tools coming that will be more robust, but it's still an amazing tool. I use it all the time.
Yeah, it is. And again, the best case scenario, at least for me, is what are, we talked about not enough hours in the day to watch all the great documentaries out there. If there are ways that I can be more efficient in my day using AI, guess what? I'm going to be happily using it.
It's just a tool.
It's just a tool. There you go. Just a tool.
Yeah.
Well, let's go over to our last story, Jay, from Billboard's State of the Hot 100 Top 10 Mid-Year 2023 report.
I love these reports from Billboard. This one's written by Gary Trust, and it's really just a look at the latest trends in Billboard's Top 10. And it's analyzed by this site that I really love called Hit Songs Deconstructed. I highly recommend that you go over and check out the website Hit Songs Deconstructed. And this is as analyzed by that site.
Right. And here are the 3 takeaways from that site, latest in-depth research. And the first one is country remains tied with pop. In the first 6 months of 2023, country and pop music remain tied as the most common primary genres in the Hot 100's top 10, each contributing to 23% of all top 10 hits. Country and pop shared the lead in Q1 2023 at 26% each. So interesting.
Yeah. And did you see that chart that they put in there? You can tell at a glance. It lists pop, country, dance club, electric, R&B, soul, Latin, and hip hop. And it has this chart over since like 2019 through the first half of 2023. And you can clearly see that pop is dropping each year, right? Yeah. You look at country, it's growing. It's really interesting to sort of kind of just glance at these different genres. The one that really jumped out at me was hip hop, which was, fairly stable. And then just in the last year, went from like 38% of the market to 14%.
Yeah, interesting. And then also interesting is that Latin tied hip hop in the first half of 2023 with 14% share of all Hot 100 top 10. So we've talked a lot on the show about the rise of Latin music, and here it is popping up again.
Yeah, and one of the key takeaways, it's easy for you to say, country helps bring back guitars. And I had this conversation, I know you and I have talked about this too. It just seems like in a lot of popular music, guitars have sort of disappeared. And then I think Olivia Rodrigo brought in a track a while back that had some really cool guitars. But Hit Songs Deconstructed, that website I told you about, it talks about the rise of guitars in the Hot 100's top, first half of 2023. Guitars, both electric and acoustic, rose to their highest levels since 2014 and over a decade, respectively, in the chart's top 10 in that span, according to the mid-year recap. While this is largely due to an influx of country hits in the top 10, right? Mm-hmm. Guitar was notably used in hits from other genres as well. So it's been a good trend.
Yeah, absolutely. They also talked about acoustic drums tripled in prominence over 2022 to just under 1/5 of songs, its highest level since 2015. Hit Songs Deconstructed notes of the instrument's presence in the Hot 100's top 10 from January through June. It's amazing they can tell the difference between acoustic drums and drum machines, which to my ears sound almost imperceptible. So good on them for figuring that out.
Yeah, and then the last one was about, and I've read a little bit about this, key changes in music, and it's becoming rarer and rarer. But as they point out in this article, as country and pop outperformed hip hop in the Hot 100's top bracket, that top 10, with major tonality increased to just over half of the songs in the first half of 2023, surpassing minor key songs for the first time since 2014.
Yeah, so you're talking major versus minor keyed songs.
Explain that, because you play piano, I play a little bit of guitar. Explain what a major compared to a minor.
Well, minor chords and minor keys tend to have a sad sound. That's probably the best way. Whereas major keyed songs tend to be kind of happy and you like the resolution of major chords oftentimes. It says major keyed Hot 100 top 10s in the first 6 months of 2023 squeaked past those primarily in a minor key, 51% to 49%. Minor key top 10s had won handily in recent years, including in 2022, where it was 58% to 39% of major key. 2021, 59%. In 2020, 60%. In 2019, 55%. So back historically, a lot of minor keyed songs. And they say outside the hip-hop genre, major keys were slightly more common, while within hip-hop, minor has always been in the majority for over a decade and accounted for 80% of songs in the first half of the year. So really fascinating, this stuff. I mean, I just love this minutia.
When I read that kind of sub-headline, I misunderstood because it says key change, a major development. I thought they were going to talk about these songs that have a key change, because I was reading this article recently that's becoming rarer and rarer. And it used to be actually very common in popular music to modulate or to have a key change. And that's what I thought, that's why I mentioned it like that. They're really talking about just major keys versus minor keys. Right. And you're absolutely right. I mean, a major key is, that's rock and roll. And the minor key, that's going to make you cry.
There you go. Exactly. And on that note, we need to wrap up the show. I know Jay and I both feel the same way, which is, hey, we appreciate you listening to the podcast every week because we never take that for granted. So big thanks for that. We also want to thank our sponsors, the people that help us really get it going and get it on the air. That's Bandzoogle, Hypebot, Bands in Town, and the Music Business Association. If you do enjoy the show, Jay and I would really appreciate it if you just told one friend. And if you don't, then Jay's coming over to your house, and you don't want that to happen.
I'm coming after you.
Yeah, he's coming after you. So on that note, we do want to say thanks. And of course, we have to acknowledge the passing of Robbie Robertson, the great Robbie Robertson from the band. Really, really a great loss. And I got to spend an afternoon with him one day about 10 years ago for a radio special, and he was nothing but charming, and we're both such big fans. And we're going to take you out with a song from the band and say so long to the great Robbie Robertson.
sun.